Hey, so we're going to take a look at UVing in Houdini for the purpose of making an HDA for use in Unity. So in Houdini, UVs are stored as vertex attributes. That means each vertex on your model is going to have an attribute called UV, and that holds the UNV coordinates of that attribute. You can see these attributes if you hop into the geometry spreadsheet and make sure you've selected the vertices tab here. Right now we don't have any UVs in our model, so there's nothing here. So side effects has a bunch of nodes here that let us add or modify UVs on our mesh. We're going to start off with just a UV unwrap. So if we plug that in and preview it, we can hit 5 in the scene view here to get to our UV view, and you can hit 1 to get back. We're going to go to our UV viewport, and we can see that we've got some UVs laid out now. And if we check our geometry spreadsheet, again, you can see all of our vertices now have a UV attribute with the coordinates kind of marked on that vertex. Anyways, so this UV unwrap node's got a couple parameters you can play with. It's got like a group selection that you can adjust. We're going to adjust the spacing a little bit so they're a little more nicely packed for us. And for some models, this might just be good enough. If I wanted to, you could just huck this into Substance Painter or whatever and kind of have at it. But we may want more control over our UVs than that, of course. So I'm not going to go super in depth with every UV node that there is, but I'll just quickly touch on a couple. So there is UV transform, and UV transform kind of works how you would expect it to work. You got translate, rotate, and scale parameters for your UVs. So you can see if we translate here, it's moving these around all crazy. If we rotate here, you can see they're rotating all crazy. We can scale them, which kind of stretches them. Things like that. There's controls for even soft selections here, and of course there's like another group parameter up here. If we just wanted to affect specific UV shells rather than the entire thing, we have that option as well. We can go check out UV project. This is a different way of creating UVs, so we're going to plug it in here and take a look. By default, your model is probably going to have this gigantic projection. You can see if we hop back to the scene view, is kind of projecting it from like one of these angles. So it's giving us this like big giant UV shell, which is not terribly useful. There's transform parameters here that are going to kind of change the result of the projection, but can be kind of not super intuitive to just mess with these on your own and trying to get a good result. So we can go to the initialize tab over here, and it's going to ask you what method you want. If you just leave at best plane, it's going to just kind of guess what plane to project your model's UVs from, but we're going to try a top-down projection. So we're going to pick the ZX plane, because if we check out our 3D viewport, you can see on the bottom corner here, our Z and X planes are kind of like this, where this grid's plane, basically. So if we project the ZX plane, we're going to get this kind of shape for our UVs. So we'll hop back to our UV view, and we're going to set this to ZX plane, and then you just click initialize, and now we've got a nice top-down projection. If you check out the transform tab again, you can see all the initialize button has really done is just kind of like filled in these values for us. So that way we didn't have to, play with these by hand and try and get a perfect fit just by fiddling with it. You can just hit initialize, and it'll kind of fit the model to UV space. Another good one to know is the UV quick shade node. So if we drop that down and plug that guy in here, we go back to our 3D view. The UV quick shade is going to give us a grid texture on our model, similar to what you would get in Maya or Blender when you're messing with UVs and you want to see what's going on. Easy way to just kind of visually check check your model's UVs. So we plug it into this Unwrap here. We can see, you know, the seams aren't really connected, but everything is looking decent otherwise. Another good thing to note about this quick shade node is if you want to look at a specific texture map, it's going to default to this UV grid gray.pick, but there's a file chooser dialog here, so you can open that up and, like, if you want to look at a specific texture on your model just to see what it's going to look like with those UVs, then you can open this up, pick your texture, and then that'll give you a better idea of what's going on. So there's lots of other UV nodes that I'm not going to go super in depth on. If you type in UV, there's a lot of hits. There's things like flattening, smoothing, things like that. So I encourage you to spend some time, check these nodes out, see what you can do by adjusting the parameters a little bit. A good one to check out is the flatten node, because it'll let you specify seams with edge groups, so that'll give you a little bit more control over the result on more like smooth surfaced models than this space station is very boxy. So that's a quick overview of how to get some simple UVs set up in your mesh. Okay, so we've got UVs set up on our model. Just to quickly show you how we set these UVs up, I've just got 3 unwrap nodes here. I'm using group selections. There's panels here, base here, and tips here. These are just primitive groups that I set up earlier in the network for the purpose of assigning these UVs and materials and stuff. We've got a UV transform node here that's just scaling up the UVs by a bunch because we just want the texture to tile a little bit more. If we check out our UV view here, we can see there's, let's zoom back in here. You can see there's 1 layer, there's 2 layers, and there's 3 layers. The reason we're doing 3 separate unwraps like this is because they're going to have 3 separate materials in Unity, and this just kind of uses the UV space a little more efficiently. And then, like I mentioned, we're scaling them up a whole bunch so that the tiling textures will tile more. To preview the textures that we're going to be applying in the Houdini viewport, I've got these UV quick shade nodes. So if we enable this one, you can see I've got panels selected as my group. It's just grabbing these couple faces around here, and we've picked like a custom texture map to show rather than like the default gray grid that this node will give you. So there's another texture we've got applied to a different section. This is the base section, and then we've got another texture applied to the tips group selection here. So that's all looking how we want it to look. Now we need to make sure that we're transferring the UVs, textures, and materials over to Unity when this is set up as an HDA. So basically our UVs as is are good. If we check our geometry spreadsheet, we've got our UV attribute set up. It looks, it's fine. If we go to our scene view, hit 5, our UVs look how I want them to look. The only thing you need to really watch out for when you're transferring your UVs is that you're not deleting the UV attribute off of your vertices. Oftentimes when I'm finishing off a network for an asset, I'll delete extraneous like groups and attributes that I don't need anymore. So if you happen to accidentally delete your UV attribute off of your vertices, you're not going to have UVs when you set this asset up in Unity in Houdini Engine. So just gotta watch out for that. Otherwise, there isn't really anything you need to do. The mesh has UVs. It's gonna have UVs in Houdini Engine. So how do we transfer over the textures and materials so that it's kind of already set up for us in Unity? The short answer is that you don't transfer those, and the long answer is that Houdini's materials don't transfer over to Unity. What we basically need to do is set up a primitive attribute that Houdini Engine Unity is going to read, and that attribute is going to have like the path to our Unity material, and so it's going to read a primitive attribute. It's going to see the path to that material, and it's going to go, oh, okay, I'm going to put that material on this face of this mesh, and then it'll do that for the entire mesh, and then we'll have our material set up, and life will be wonderful. So the way we do that is we're going to set up an attribute create, wire that in and preview it. So the name of the attribute that we want is Unity underscore material. Houdini Engine Unity is going to look for like this specific name. We're going to want to set this to a primitive class, and you want the type to be a string. We're going to want 3 of these because we have we want 3 materials on this asset, so I'm going to make 3 of these nodes. Real quick, just copy and paste them, wire them together, looks good. Okay, they are all primitive string attributes, yes, that's good, okay. So we're going to set the groups up, we'll call this, or we'll set this one to panels, we'll set this one to base, and we'll set this one to tips down here. Alright, and then all we need to do is type in the location of the Unity material that we want this group of primitives to have. So we just need to know where that material is stored in Unity. So maybe let's say assets, materials, space station, panels.mat. It's important to include the .mat because it's looking for like the actual material file. But, you know, say you're not sure where your material is stored. You don't want to have to like hop over to Unity and then hunt it down and then remember the path, then hop back to Houdini and type it in. That's a lot of work. What we can do is when this is set up as an HDA, and it already is, so I can go up to here to assets and go to edit asset properties and click on our space station. You can see I don't have any parameters set up right now, but given that this string value is a parameter, I can just drag this in here, and I'm going to call this panels material. We're going to blank this out just so it doesn't have any value by default, and I'll hit apply. Okay, we have to blank it out over here, my mistake. Okay. So now this has turned green, so that means we've successfully linked it to like this parameter here in our HDA. We're going to do that for the other 2. So we're going to drag this in here. This one is our base material, and we'll grab this one, drag it in there. This is our tips material. We're going to hit apply. So the reason we can the reason we want to do this is because, like I said, rather than trying to remember where all of our materials are exactly stored in our project, we can just set these up as parameters to use. So once we're playing with this HDA in Unity, we'll just have 3 text boxes like in Unity, and we can just type in the location of the materials there rather than having to like hop back and forth. This also gives us the ability to like say move that material to somewhere else and then not like have this whole thing break. We can just like type in the new path directly into Unity. You don't have to like hop back over to Houdini, reconfigure everything and save it again and blah blah blah, you know. So that's pretty much everything that you need to know about prepping your model in Houdini to get textures and materials. Just to quickly recap, you don't transfer textures and materials. You just kind of mark the faces of your mesh with an attribute, and then Houdini Engine reads the value of that attribute, which is the path to the material that you want in Unity, and then it applies that like already pre-existing material in Unity to those faces. And the UVs will carry over, you know, so long as your mesh has the UV vertex attribute like intact. And that's all there is to that.